My name is Claire Cole, and I'm 27 years old. Last Christmas Eve, my grandfather sat down at my father's dinner table, carved a slice of ham, looked at me across the green beans, and asked a question so simple it nearly split the room in half. So, Claire, how's that property on Riverside managing? Your mother would have loved knowing you kept it in the family. I set my fork down. What property, Grandpa? 7 people at that table. Nobody moved. My father's hand froze around his beer bottle. My stepmother Linda gripped the edge of the serving platter like she was trying to keep the whole evening from sliding off the table. One question from my grandfather unraveled 3 years of lies and changed every single thing I believed about my family. Before I take you back to that night, welcome to Midnight Drama Stories. If this hits home, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you're new here, subscribe. You're not alone in this. Now let me take you back to a Thursday in October, 18 years ago, the day my mother stopped breathing and my father started disappearing. My mother died on a Thursday in October, and the rain didn't stop for a week. Her name was Catherine Mitchell before she married my father. She was an elementary school librarian with a voice that could calm any classroom and a laugh that echoed through our house on Sunday mornings. Every weekend, she'd pull out a tackle box full of fishing lures, the one her father had given her, and we'd drive to the lake. I always picked the red spinner. She always pretended she didn't know I would. I was 9 when the ovarian cancer took her. Stage 4 by the time they found it. The doctors used the word aggressive like it was supposed to make sense of something senseless. After the funeral, my father went quiet. Not angry, not mean, just absent. He started working late at the construction company, then later at the bar, then later still at wherever men go when they can't stand the silence of a house that used to have her in it. I'd hear his truck pull into the driveway at midnight, sometimes later. He'd open the fridge, stand there in the blue light for a while, close it and go to bed. Grandpa Frank, my mother's father, stepped in the way a foundation steps in when the walls start to lean. Every Saturday morning, his old Chevy pickup would rumble into our driveway, and I'd climb into the passenger seat with my backpack and a change of clothes. His workshop smelled like sawdust and motor oil. He'd been a contractor for 45 years, built half the strip malls in our county, and had hands like leather from decades of hammering, drilling, and fixing things that were broken. On those weekends, he taught me how to frame a wall, how to read a level, how to change brake pads. He told me stories about my mother when she was my age, how she'd bring him lunch on job sites, how she always rescued injured birds and kept them in shoeboxes until they could fly again. Your mother never waited for permission to do the right thing, he said once, tightening a bolt on a sawhorse. She just did it. He said something else that stuck with me, though I didn't understand it at the time. We were sitting in his truck, eating drive-through burgers, watching a summer storm roll across the horizon. He squeezed my shoulder. I'll make sure you're taken care of, Claire. That's a promise. I was 10 years old. I didn't know what he meant. I wouldn't understand for another 17 years. Linda Foster arrived in our house the way fog arrives, slowly, then everywhere, until you can't remember what it looked like before. My father introduced her 2 years after my mother died. I was 11. She had blonde hair, a warm smile, and a habit of laughing at everything my father said, even when it wasn't funny. She brought me a stuffed bear the first time she came to dinner. She made meatloaf. She reorganized the garage. For 6 months, I believed it. Then the small rearrangement started. My bedroom, the one next to my parents' room, the one where my mother used to read me books before bed, became the office. I was moved to the basement. Just until we sort out the nursery situation, Linda said, one hand on her stomach. She was pregnant with Tyler. I never moved back. The photographs shifted too. My mother's face, which had hung in the living room and the hallway and above the mantel, gradually disappeared, replaced by new portraits. Robert and Linda at a wedding. Robert and Linda holding ultrasound printouts. Robert and Linda with a newborn in matching Christmas sweaters. In every frame, 2 people starting over. In none of them, the daughter from the chapter they'd rather forget. Linda wasn't cruel in any way you could point to. She didn't yell. She didn't ground me unfairly. She was simply warm when there was an audience, Grandpa Frank, the neighbors, the guys from Dad's crew, and neutral when there wasn't. She'd ask Tyler what he wanted for dinner, and then serve whatever she decided without asking me. She'd plan family trips to the zoo and mention them at breakfast the morning after they happened. My father didn't stop her. He didn't encourage it either. He just existed in the narrow space between the woman he'd married and the daughter he didn't know how to face anymore. Tyler James Cole arrived in February. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. And my father transformed overnight into a man I barely recognized. He held Tyler constantly. He took photos. He posted them online with captions like, "My whole world," which, if you did the math, left me somewhere outside the frame. Tyler got the biggest bedroom. I stayed in the basement, a room with one window near the ceiling, a space heater that rattled, and the washing machine humming through the drywall. "It has its own bathroom," Linda pointed out, as if plumbing were a substitute for being part of the family. "You'll love the privacy." I was 12. I didn't want privacy. I wanted someone to notice I was being erased. The one constant in those years was Grandpa Frank. He drove up from his place every month, always on the second Saturday, always with 2 gifts. One for me, one for Tyler. Equal. Wrapped in the same paper. He was the only person in that house who treated us like we came from the same family. One Thanksgiving, after Linda spent 15 minutes showing off Tyler's soccer trophy, Grandpa Frank turned to me at the sink where I was rinsing dishes nobody had asked me to rinse. "You doing all right, sweetheart?" "I'm fine, Grandpa." He studied me the way he studied a joint before deciding whether to reinforce it or rebuild it. "Just wait," he said, winking. "Good things take time." Later that evening, when Linda was putting Tyler to bed and Dad was watching football, Grandpa pulled me aside on the back porch. "When you turn 25, he said, voice low, "I have something for you. Something your mother wanted you to have." "What is it?" "Patience, kiddo." He squeezed my hand. I didn't push it, but I carried that sentence around like a quarter in my pocket for the next 15 years. Small enough to forget about, heavy enough to always feel. At 18, I had 2 jobs, 1 bus pass, and the growing understanding that being invisible was not the same thing as being safe. I worked mornings as a barista at a coffee shop, weekends doing inventory at a craft store. I bought my own textbooks. I packed my own lunches. I rode the 6:45 bus because nobody offered to drive me. And after a while, I stopped expecting them to. That same year, my father's construction business hit trouble. A commercial project fell through. A contractor sued. He'd invested everything in a strip mall renovation that collapsed when the anchor tenant backed out. He didn't talk about the debt, but I heard the phone calls at night through the thin basement ceiling. Sharp, fast, circular. The sound of 2 people who knew they were drowning and were trying to decide whose fault it was. I graduated high school on a Friday in June. Grandpa Frank sat in the front row, arrived an hour early, and clapped louder than anyone. My father showed up late, sat in the back, and left before the reception. Linda didn't come at all. She said Tyler had a baseball game. I didn't check. I enrolled at community college that fall. Business management because it was practical and because the tuition was something I could cover with the coffee shop wages if I added evening shifts at the craft store. I lived at home, but Linda made sure the arrangement felt transactional. "You're an adult now," she said one morning, sliding a sticky note across the counter. On it, a dollar amount. "Your share of groceries and utilities. It's only fair." I paid it every month without argument. Grandpa Frank kept calling. Every Sunday, like clockwork. We'd talk about work, about cooking shows, about whether I'd tried that new Thai place on Colfax. He never mentioned the something he'd promised. I never asked. I trusted him the way you trust a foundation. You don't question it. You just build on it. I moved into my own apartment when I was 24. A studio in Lakewood, $1,100 a month if I didn't run the heat above 62. It was 400 square feet of laminate flooring and a kitchenette smaller than a closet. I loved every inch of it. What I didn't love was how quiet my phone got. My father called maybe 3 times that first year. Short calls. Just checking in. Calls that lasted 2 minutes and covered nothing. He never asked about my job or my apartment or whether I was eating enough. He asked if I was doing okay, the way you ask a stranger at a bus stop, already looking past them. I tried calling Grandpa Frank in late 2022. The number went to a voicemail I didn't recognize. Generic recording. No name. I left messages.
Hey, Grandpa.
Just wanted to hear your voice. Call me when you can. He never called back.
I asked my father about it.
He moved to Arizona for his arthritis, Dad said, not looking up from his phone. Warm weather. Physical therapy.
He's fine.
Just needs rest. I believed him, because what was the alternative? That the last person who remembered my mother's laugh had decided to stop remembering mine? I told myself he was just old. It was easier than the other possibility. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn for another 3 years, was that Linda had given Grandpa Frank the wrong phone number for me. She told him I'd changed my cell. The number she gave him rang to a disconnected line. And when Grandpa Frank asked my father about me, my father said, "She's doing great, Pop real busy. Doesn't want to be bothered." Meanwhile, Grandpa Frank had signed over a commercial property to my father. A small office building on Riverside Avenue, the one my great-grandfather had built in the 1960s. He'd also transferred $400,000 into my father's account with a single instruction written on the transfer memo for Claire Cole. College, property upkeep, future. My father signed the papers.
He said he would give them to me.
On my 25th birthday, a card arrived from Grandpa Frank. 4 months late, forwarded twice, postage smudged. Inside, in his neat handwriting, "Hope the property's treating you well, sweetheart. Your mother would be proud." I read it twice, thought his memory was slipping, pinned it to my fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower, and went to bed. The email arrived on December 18th, 12 words from a woman who hadn't spoken to me in over a year. Christmas Eve dinner at our place. 6 p.m., bring nothing. It wouldn't feel like Christmas without you. I stared at the screen. Linda's tone was honey, the kind of warmth she poured on thick when she needed something to look a certain way. I almost deleted it. Almost.
Then I saw the second line.
Grandpa Frank confirmed he's coming too. I called Aunt Sarah that evening, my mother's younger sister, the one who'd shown up to my graduation with flowers when nobody else brought any. "Frank's back from Arizona," Sarah said. "Been here 2 months, Claire. That man has been asking about you every single week. Calling Robert. Calling Linda. They kept telling him you were busy." My hand tightened around the phone. "Every week. Every single one.
He's worried sick.
He thinks you've been avoiding him." I sat on the edge of my bed, and something rearranged itself in my chest. 3 years of silence. 3 years of thinking my grandfather had forgotten me while he spent those same 3 years thinking I was the one who'd walked away. Someone had built that wall between us. And I was starting to understand who laid the bricks. "Go see him, Claire," Sarah said. "Whatever's going on in that house, Frank needs to see your face." I said yes to the RSVP before I could change my mind. The night before Christmas Eve, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my studio apartment. I didn't own much worth wearing, but I'd kept one thing through every move, every closet purge. A cardigan my mother had knit by hand the winter before she got sick. Cream-colored wool, slightly uneven at the hem, with a tiny embroidered C at the inside collar. Catherine. I pulled it on. It still smelled faintly of cedar from the box I kept it in. I didn't know that Linda had invited me for the same reason she'd always kept me just close enough to photograph, because Grandpa Frank was watching and the show needed its full cast. I was the extra she couldn't afford to leave off stage. But I didn't go for her. I went for him. The house I grew up in was gone. In its place stood something shinier, newer, and paid for with money I would later learn was mine. I pulled into the driveway at 10 minutes to 6. The first thing I noticed was the truck. Brand new Silverado, black, crew cab, still had the dealer plates. Parked where my father's old work truck used to sit. The second thing was the house itself. New siding. New roof. The porch that used to sag on the right side had been rebuilt with composite decking and LED lighting strips. I did the math. Dad manages a crew at a mid-level construction firm. Linda works part-time at a dentist's office. The business had collapsed 6 years ago with over $200,000 in debt. None of this added up. Inside, it added up even less. The kitchen had quartz countertops and stainless steel appliances. The living room furniture was new, a leather sectional, a 75-inch TV mounted above a gas fireplace that hadn't been there before. A Christmas tree touched the ceiling, wrapped in silver ribbon and white lights, with matching ornaments that looked like they'd been professionally coordinated. Linda greeted me at the door with a hug that felt rehearsed. "Claire, sweetheart, you look wonderful." She smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, the same candle scent my mother used to light on Christmas Eve. The realization passed through me like cold water. Tyler was on the couch, 17 now, tall, wearing a Patagonia jacket that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. He glanced up. "Hey." Then back to his phone. I walked through the living room and stopped at the mantel. 3 small framed photos sat on the second shelf. Me standing with the family at a barbecue I didn't remember. Me at Tyler's birthday party I'd never attended. Me at a lake with my arm around Linda. Everyone smiling. I didn't remember any of these moments. Not the barbecue, not the party, not the lake. Something about my face in each one felt wrong, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong space. And then I saw it. On top of the bookshelf, half hidden behind a stack of coasters. A small tackle box. Green metal, rusted at the corners, my mother's initials scratched into the lid. The one she used to take to the lake. The one Grandpa Frank had given her. Linda was using it to hold remote controls. I stood there, staring at my mother's tackle box holding TV remotes in a house paid for with money I didn't know existed, and I felt something crack open inside me that I'd kept shut for 18 years. The table was set for 7, but the way Linda had arranged the chairs, you'd think there were only 6 people worth sitting near. I was at the far end, between an empty seat and the wall. Aunt Sarah arrived next, took one look at my placement, and dragged her chair directly beside mine. Uncle Dennis followed, settling in with the quiet authority of a man who preferred listening to performing. Dad sat at the head. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer. Thinner in the face. He greeted me with a half hug and a "glad you could make it," then busied himself with opening a bottle of wine like it required all his concentration. 2 of Dad's work buddies filled out the table. Mike Torres and his wife Jenna. Mike shook my hand. "Good to see you, Claire. Been a while." Jenna smiled politely. Linda moved around the table, refilling glasses, narrating Tyler's accomplishments. Tyler made varsity. Tyler got accepted to CU Boulder. Tyler's coach said he could play college ball if he wanted. "And Claire," Linda said, turning to me with a smile so polished it could cut glass, "how's the apartment?" "Fine." "That's wonderful." She moved on. The question had been a formality, not an inquiry. It lasted exactly as long as she needed it to. Sarah leaned over. "How's my niece?" "Really?" Something in my throat tightened. It had been a long time since anyone asked that question and waited for the real answer. "I'm okay," I said. "Better now." She squeezed my hand under the table. Then the doorbell rang. It was 7:38. Linda's face did something fast. A tightness around the jaw. Gone before anyone else could see it.
But I saw it.
Grandpa Frank walked through the front door carrying a bag of gifts in one hand and a leather briefcase in the other. The gifts were for Christmas. The briefcase was for something else. He was thinner than the last time I'd seen him, 3 years and 2 months ago at a diner off I-70, where we'd had breakfast before he left for Arizona. His hair had gone full white, and he moved slower, but his eyes were the same.
Sharp. Steady.
The eyes of a man who measures twice before he cuts anything. He saw me and stopped in the doorway. "Claire." I stood up. My chair scraped the floor. He crossed the room in 4 steps and wrapped his arms around me. I pressed my face into his shoulder and smelled sawdust and Old Spice and something that might have been motor oil. The same as always. "Let me look at you." He held me at arm's length. His voice cracked. "You look just like her." I couldn't speak. He pulled me back in, and I let myself be held the way I hadn't been held in 3 years. The way that means someone is actually glad you exist. He greeted the rest of the table with the efficiency of a man who'd spent 50 years running job sites. A nod to Sarah and Dennis. A handshake for Mike. A polite Linda that carried no warmth but no hostility either. He looked at my father. Just a look. The kind a father gives a son when something is pending between them. Dad looked away first. Grandpa Frank took the empty seat beside me and set the briefcase on the floor. Close. Within reach. The way a contractor sets his toolbox when he knows a job is coming. We were midway through the main course. Linda had just brought out the mashed potatoes. Tyler was telling Jenna about his football stats. Dad was pouring his third beer, which was two more than I'd ever seen him drink at dinner. The room hummed with the comfortable noise of silverware and small talk and a family pretending everything was fine. Grandpa Frank cut a piece of ham, chewed, set his knife down. Then he looked across the table at me, smiled the way he always smiled, warm and deliberate, and said it. So, Claire, how's that property on Riverside managing? Your mother would have loved knowing you kept it in the family. The sentence landed like a wrench dropped on a tile floor. I set my fork down. What property, Grandpa?
Silence.
The kind of silence where you can hear the candle on the centerpiece flickering. He leaned forward. The property on Riverside Avenue, sweetheart. I signed the deed over to your father 3 years ago.
For you.
He said it the way he'd read a blueprint. Factual.
Precise.
No room for interpretation. Along with the account. $400,000. For your future. I heard Sarah inhale. I heard Dennis set his fork down. I heard Tyler's fork hit his plate. I looked at my father. I never received anything. Dad didn't move. His hand was still wrapped around his beer bottle. He stared at a spot on the tablecloth like he was trying to burn a hole through it. Grandpa Frank turned his head slowly. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just the measured rotation of a man aiming a light into a dark corner. He looked at my father. Robert. My father's throat worked. No sound came out. Linda's knuckles had gone white around the serving spoon. Grandpa Frank didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Where's her property, Robert? My father lied the way he did everything. Poorly, halfway, hoping someone else would finish the job. Dad, there was a misunderstanding. His voice cracked. He set the beer down too hard. Foam spilled onto the tablecloth. We were holding it for Claire until she was ready. Linda jumped in. We didn't want to overwhelm her. Grandpa Frank raised one hand. The room went silent. I signed those papers in September 3 years ago. I told you to give them to Claire that month. You told me you would. Dad opened his mouth. Closed it. What property, Robert? Sarah's voice came from my left, thin and tight. Dennis put a hand on her shoulder, but his eyes stayed on my father, cold and unblinking. Grandpa Frank opened the briefcase the way he used to open his toolbox. No rush. No drama. Just a man reaching for exactly the right instrument. He pulled out a manila folder and laid it between the ham and the green beans. Deed of transfer, he said, sliding the first page forward. Signed by me. Countersigned by Robert Cole. Dated September 12th. He turned to the next document. Bank wire confirmation. $400,000 from my account to yours, Robert. Same date. Memo line reads, for Claire Cole. College, property upkeep, future. He pulled out one more sheet. A printed email. He read it aloud. Robert, just checking in. Did Claire get the property keys and account details? Want to make sure everything's settled. He paused. Looked at my father. Your reply? September 20th. All taken care of, Pop. She's thrilled. Dad's face was the color of old concrete. Linda had stopped serving. She sat rigid, running calculations behind her eyes. Mike stood up first. His chair scraped the floor. Robert, what the hell is this? Grandpa Frank closed the folder. He didn't slam it. He placed it flat on the table. I didn't come here to make a scene. I came here to give my granddaughter her Christmas. He looked at my father, not with rage, not with disgust, but with the patient disappointment of a man who'd trusted someone to carry a load and watched them drop it. But I need to understand where her property went. He folded his hands. So tell me, son, where did it go? My father confessed the way foundations crack. Slowly, under pressure, and never in a straight line. The business debt. I owed $220,000. The bank was going to take this house. Don't, Linda said. Her voice cut across the table. Don't you put this on me, Robert. Did you use the money? Grandpa Frank asked. Dad closed his eyes.
Nodded.
All of it. Another nod. I spoke. My voice came out quieter than I expected, but in that silence, it carried. The renovations. Tyler's school. The truck in the driveway. I pointed toward the living room. That was my money. Dad didn't answer. That was my money. It wasn't a question anymore. I looked around the table. The leather furniture. The flat-screen TV. The professionally decorated tree. All of it purchased with money a 72-year-old man had set aside for his granddaughter because his daughter had died and nobody else was looking out for her. I stood up. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to throw anything. I just need you to hear this. I spent 3 years wondering what I did wrong. Why Grandpa's number didn't work. Why I was eating ramen 4 nights a week so I could make rent. I looked at the quartz countertops, the new appliances, the silver ribbon on the tree. Turns out I was worth exactly $400,000 and a building. You just decided I wasn't worth telling. I turned to Grandpa Frank. Can we leave? He was already reaching for the briefcase. He stood, straightened his jacket, and looked at my father one last time. I'll have my attorney contact you Monday, Robert. This isn't over. But tonight, I'm taking my granddaughter home. Dad said nothing. Linda said nothing. The Christmas tree twinkled behind them, still and perfect, illuminating a table set for 7 where nobody was eating anymore. I picked up my coat. I picked up my mother's cardigan from the back of my chair. I didn't look back. 6 months later, I had a new apartment, a new job, and the same old tackle box. Grandpa Frank's attorney recovered partial restitution. The property was heavily mortgaged, but we got it back. I'm renting it out now, using the income to finish my degree. My father called once. I didn't answer. Linda sent one text. You always wanted attention. Congratulations. I blocked the number. Tyler reached out last month from a friend's phone. I didn't know Claire. I swear. I believe him. He's 17. He didn't make this choice.
They did.
Last Christmas, I cooked dinner for 4 people in Grandpa Frank's kitchen. Aunt Sarah came. Uncle Dennis came. Tyler came, his choice, not his mother's. We sat around a small table with mismatched chairs and paper napkins. But every single person at that table had chosen to be there. 1 year ago, I sat at the far end of my father's table wondering what I'd done wrong. This year, I sat at the head of mine, smaller, quieter, and entirely my own. I didn't get full justice. The property's still underwater. Dad still owes money he'll probably never repay. But I got something better. I got a table where everyone who sits at it chose to be there. Turns out that's the only kind worth setting. If you've ever had to draw a line with your own family, or if you're still working up the courage, drop your story in the comments. You might be surprised how many people understand exactly what you went through. This is Midnight Drama Stories. I'll see you in the next one.